D.A.R.E shirt on Teespring.
The 1980s in America were a period of intense public anxiety. This anxiety was heavily focused on drug use. The media amplified fears, particularly concerning the rise of crack cocaine. This created a narrative of a nation under siege by a drug epidemic. Parents worried constantly about their children's exposure to illicit substances. They demanded action from leaders and institutions. This widespread concern created a fertile ground for new anti-drug initiatives. Politicians felt immense pressure to respond decisively to these public fears. The atmosphere was one of moral panic, seeking immediate solutions. Drug abuse resistance education, or D.A.R.E, was born in this climate. It was founded in 1983. The program was a joint effort. It involved the Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, and the Los Angeles Unified School District, LAUSD. LAPD Chief Daryl was a key figure in its creation. The primary goal was straightforward. It aimed to prevent drug use among children. The focus was primarily on elementary and middle school students. The idea was to intervene early before drug experimentation might begin. This proactive stance appealed to many. The core concept of D.A.R.E was unique at the time. It involved using active duty police officers as instructors in classrooms. The belief was that uniformed officers would be seen as credible authority figures. They were expected to serve as positive role models for young students. The curriculum aimed to teach children skills to resist peer pressure. A central message was learning to just say no to drugs. The program initially focused on what were termed gateway drugs. These included tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana. The theory was that preventing use of these substances would stop progression to harder drugs. D.A.R.E experienced remarkably rapid growth and expansion. It received strong support from politicians across the spectrum. The public also embraced the program enthusiastically. It was widely perceived as a tangible, proactive step against the drug problem. Funding for D.A.R.E became readily available from various government and private sources. The program seemed to offer a simple answer to a complex issue. Its visibility and apparent commitment to protecting children made it a popular initiative. Few questioned its methods or effectiveness in these early, optimistic years. The need for a solution was so great. The implementation of D.A.R.E followed a structured model. Police departments selected officers to become D.A.R.E instructors. These officers underwent a specialized, though relatively brief, training program. Once trained, they would enter elementary and middle school classrooms. A key element was that officers delivered the program in their police uniforms. This was intended to reinforce their authority and credibility. The curriculum was standardized, consisting of a set number of lessons. Typically, the program targeted students in the 5th or 6th grade, an age deemed critical for intervention. The D.A.R.E curriculum primarily focused on the negative consequences of drug use. It provided information about various substances, emphasizing their dangers. A significant portion of the lessons was dedicated to teaching refusal skills. Students were taught different ways to say no if offered drugs. The curriculum covered tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana extensively. It also touched upon other illicit drugs like inhalants and cocaine. Role-playing exercises were a common teaching method. Students would practice responding to scenarios involving peer pressure. The goal was to build confidence in resisting. Various materials were used to support the D.A.R.E lessons. Students often received workbooks filled with activities and information. Videos depicting scenarios and consequences of drug use were also shown. D.A.R.E merchandise became very popular and visible. This included items like t-shirts, pencils, bumper stickers, and rulers, all bearing the D.A.R.E logo. Many schools held D.A.R.E graduation ceremonies upon completion of the program. Students would receive certificates and sometimes pledge to remain drug-free. These elements aimed to create a sense of belonging and reinforce the program's messages. D.A.R.E quickly grew from a local Los Angeles program into a national phenomenon. By the early 1990s, it was implemented in a vast majority of school districts across the United States. Its reach extended to other countries as well, becoming an international brand. The program's iconic red and black logo was ubiquitous. D.A.R.E became one of the most visible and well-funded drug prevention programs in history. It symbolized America's commitment to fighting the war on drugs by targeting its youngest citizens. Its widespread adoption spoke to the deep societal desire to protect children from drug harm. In the early years of D.A.R.E, evaluations of its effectiveness were often limited. Many initial studies were anecdotal. They relied on positive feedback from teachers, parents, and the police officers delivering the program. Some early assessments showed small, short-term improvements in students' attitudes about drugs or police. However, these studies frequently lacked methodological rigor. They often did not include control groups or long-term follow-up. This made it difficult to determine if D.A.R.E was truly preventing drug use. The program's popularity, however, continued to soar despite this lack of robust evidence. As D.A.R.E became more widespread, more sophisticated research began to emerge. Social scientists and public health researchers started conducting longitudinal studies. These studies tracked students for several years, often into their high school years and beyond. They compared the drug use patterns of students who had participated in D.A.R.E with those who had not. This type of research design is crucial for assessing the true impact of a prevention program. The results from these more rigorous evaluations began to paint a different picture of D.A.R.E's effectiveness. It was a picture that challenged the program's foundational claims. The overwhelming scientific consensus from these more robust studies was sobering. They consistently found that the original D.A.R.E program was ineffective in preventing or reducing drug use among adolescents. Most studies showed no significant difference in drug use rates between students who completed D.A.R.E and those who did not. Some research even hinted at unintended negative consequences. For example, a few studies suggested a boomerang effect, where D.A.R.E might have inadvertently increased curiosity about drugs in some students. The evidence was mounting against the program's efficacy. Specific findings from numerous studies highlighted D.A.R.E's shortcomings. It did not lead to any significant lasting reductions in the use of alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, or other illicit drugs. While there might have been temporary positive shifts in students' knowledge about drugs or their attitudes towards law enforcement, these effects tended to fade quickly, usually within a year or two. The program did not appear to equip students with effective, durable refusal skills that they could apply in real-world situations as they grew older. The scientific community became increasingly critical of D.A.R.E's continued widespread use. Criticism of the D.A.R.E curriculum was a major point of concern. Many experts argued that its central just say, no message was overly simplistic. It failed to address the complex underlying reasons why young people might experiment with or use drugs. The program often relied on scare tactics. It sometimes presented inaccurate or exaggerated information about the dangers of certain substances. This approach could undermine credibility with older, more skeptical students. The curriculum did not adequately prepare students for the nuances of peer influence or the social contexts in which drug use decisions are made. It offered few alternative coping strategies. The use of police officers as primary educators also drew significant criticism. While the officers were generally well-intentioned and dedicated, most lacked extensive training in child development, pedagogy, or addiction science. Their primary expertise was in law enforcement, not education or public health. For some students, particularly those from marginalized communities or those with negative experiences with law enforcement, the presence of a uniformed officer in the classroom could be intimidating or alienating. For others, it might have inadvertently normalized police presence in schools without addressing deeper issues of community police relations or systemic inequities. Another line of criticism focused on the developmental appropriateness of the D.A.R.E content. Some of the material and discussions were not well suited for the cognitive and emotional development of late elementary or early middle school students. The program often failed to account for key aspects of adolescent psychology. This includes the natural inclination towards curiosity, risk-taking behavior, and the powerful influence of peer groups. Simply telling adolescents to resist peer pressure without providing them with more sophisticated social-emotional skills proved to be an insufficient strategy. The focus was too narrow. Furthermore, the original D.A.R.E program was often delivered in a didactic lecture-style format. This left little room for genuine interaction, open discussion, or the development of critical thinking skills regarding drugs and drug policy. Students were largely expected to passively receive information and accept the program's messages without question. There was limited opportunity to explore the complexities of addiction, the reasons for drug laws, or the potential harms and benefits of different approaches to drug use in society. The emphasis was more on compliance and obedience rather than on fostering informed, autonomous decision-making. Section 5. Fading Effects. The long-term reality of D.A.R.E. One of the most consistent findings from rigorous research on the original D.A.R.E. program concerned the durability of its effects. Even in studies that detected minor positive changes, such as improved attitudes towards police or slight increases in anti-drug knowledge, these impacts were typically short-lived. These small gains usually disappeared within 1 to 2 years after students completed the program. This was a critical flaw. For a prevention program aimed at influencing behavior during adolescence and beyond, effects that vanish so quickly offer very little practical value in terms of actual drug use prevention. Longitudinal studies that followed students into their high school years and sometimes into early adulthood delivered a clear message. D.A.R.E. graduates were generally just as likely to use alcohol, tobacco, or illicit drugs as their peers who had never participated in the program. The extensive intervention during their elementary or middle school years did not translate into meaningfully different behavioral outcomes later in life. The protective shield that D.A.R.E. promised to provide simply was not there when it mattered most, during the teenage years when experimentation often begins. This lack of long-term impact was a major disappointment. The underlying theory of D.A.R.E. seemed to be based on an inoculation model. The idea was that exposing children to anti-drug messages and refusal skills early on would inoculate them against future drug use, much like a vaccine protects against disease. However, this theory did not hold up under scientific scrutiny. Human behavior, especially concerning substance use, is far more complex than this simple model suggests. The D.A.R.E. program, as originally designed, did not provide a lasting immunity to the myriad social, psychological, and environmental factors that can influence a young person's decisions about drugs. Given the consistent findings of its ineffectiveness, a significant criticism emerged regarding the allocation of resources. D.A.R.E. was an expensive program. It consumed vast sums of public and private money. It also required substantial commitments of personnel time from police departments and school staff. Critics argued that these considerable resources could have been far better utilized. They could have funded prevention programs that had demonstrated effectiveness through scientific research, or they could have supported other youth services known to promote positive development and resilience, such as mental health support or after-school programs. Section 6, a new chapter, D.A.R.E.'s evolution to keeping it real. The growing body of scientific evidence demonstrating D.A.R.E.'s lack of effectiveness, coupled with persistent public critique from researchers and health professionals, eventually began to exert pressure on D.A.R.E. America, the organization overseeing the program. For many years, D.A.R.E. had staunchly defended its original model. It often dismissed negative research findings or questioned the motives of critics. However, by the early 2000s, the weight of the evidence became increasingly difficult to ignore. The organization slowly started to acknowledge the need for change and began to explore alternative approaches. This marked a pivotal moment for the long-standing program. This acknowledgement led D.A.R.E. America to embark on a search for a new evidence-based curriculum. This was a significant departure from its previous stance. It signaled a willingness to engage with the scientific community and to prioritize program effectiveness over tradition or popularity. The organization began to review various prevention programs that had undergone rigorous scientific testing and had demonstrated positive outcomes in reducing substance use among youth. This shift was encouraged by federal agencies like the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which promoted the use of evidence-based practices in prevention. After a period of review and consideration, D.A.R.E. America made a landmark decision. In 2009, it officially adopted a new curriculum called Keeping It Real. This curriculum was developed by a team of prevention researchers at Pennsylvania State University and Arizona State University. Unlike the original D.A.R.E., Keeping It Real had been subjected to extensive, rigorous scientific evaluation. These studies had shown it to be effective in reducing substance use and promoting positive decision-making skills among middle school students. The adoption of this new curriculum was a major step towards reforming D.A.R.E., the Keeping It Real curriculum differs substantially from the original D.A.R.E program in its content and approach. The name itself is an acronym standing for Refuse, Explain, Avoid, and Leave. These represent a set of core strategies students learn to navigate risky situations. The curriculum places a strong emphasis on developing critical thinking, decision-making, communication, and drug-resistance skills. It is designed to be more interactive and engaging than the old D.A.R.E. It also aims to be more culturally sensitive, recognizing and incorporating diverse student experiences. While still delivered by police officers, the pedagogical approach is different, focusing more on facilitation. Section 7. Embracing Evidence, the shift in D.A.R.E.'s approach. The transition to the Keeping It Real curriculum represented a significant philosophical shift for D.A.R.E. America. It signaled an embrace, at least in principle, of the importance of evidence-based practice in the field of drug prevention. This was a crucial development. For decades, D.A.R.E. had been a prime example of a widely implemented program that lacked strong scientific support for its effectiveness. The decision to adopt a curriculum backed by research indicated a newfound willingness to align the program with scientific standards. This move was welcomed by many in the public health and prevention science communities. Understanding what evidence-based means is key in this context. An evidence-based program is one that has been rigorously tested, typically using randomized controlled trials or other strong research designs. Its outcomes are carefully measured, comparing participants to a control group. Effectiveness is demonstrated through quantifiable data, not just through anecdotal reports, testimonials, or perceived popularity. The Keeping It Real curriculum had met these criteria. Its developers had published studies in peer-reviewed journals showing its positive impact on youth substance use and related risk factors. This was a stark contrast to the original D.A.R.E. Implementing the new Keeping It Real curriculum required significant changes for D.A.R.E. programs nationwide. D.A.R.E. officers needed to undergo new and more intensive training to deliver this different curriculum effectively. The teaching style for Keeping It Real is more facilitative and less didactic than the old D.A.R.E. It encourages more student participation, discussion, and skill building through interactive exercises and culturally relevant scenarios. The aim is to help students genuinely develop and internalize decision-making and resistance skills, rather than simply imparting information or fear-based messages. This requires a different skill set from instructors. For any prevention program to maintain its status as evidence-based, it requires ongoing monitoring, evaluation, and a commitment to fidelity in its implementation. The hope is that D.A.R.E. America and local D.A.R.E. programs will continue this commitment to evidence. This means ensuring that the Keeping It Real curriculum is delivered as intended. It also means being open to further research on its effectiveness in diverse settings and with diverse populations. The field of prevention science is constantly evolving, and programs must be willing to adapt based on new evidence to remain effective and relevant over time. Section 8. Beyond D.A.R.E. The call for comprehensive drug education. While the adoption of an evidence-based curriculum like Keeping It Real is a positive step for D.A.R.E., it is important to recognize the limitations of any single school-based program. Even the most effective curriculum delivered in schools cannot by itself solve the complex problem of youth substance use. Truly effective drug prevention requires a comprehensive, multifaceted approach. This approach must extend beyond the classroom. It needs to involve various sectors of society working together to support young people's health and well-being. Relying solely on one program, however improved, is insufficient. Comprehensive drug education and prevention involves multiple components and stakeholders. Families play a crucial role in shaping children's attitudes and behaviors regarding substances. Communities can provide supportive environments and positive alternatives for youth. Healthcare providers can offer screening, brief interventions, and treatment when needed. Effective prevention also addresses underlying factors that may contribute to substance use. These include mental health issues, trauma, social determinants of health like poverty and lack of opportunity, and the development of general coping skills and resilience. It's a holistic endeavor. Furthermore, drug education needs to be age-appropriate and should evolve as children mature. What is suitable for a fifth grader is very different from what a high school senior needs. Prevention efforts should ideally begin early, focusing on building foundational social-emotional skills and healthy habits. As students get older, the content should become more sophisticated. It should address the specific risks and pressures they face. Drug education should not be a one-time event, but rather an ongoing conversation that adapts to young people's changing developmental stages, knowledge levels, and social contexts. A critical aspect of comprehensive drug education, particularly for older adolescents, is moving beyond a purely abstinence-only message. While preventing or delaying the initiation of drug use is a primary goal for younger age groups, it is also important to acknowledge reality. Some young people will inevitably experiment with or use substances despite prevention efforts. Therefore, education for older teens and young adults should also include principles of harm reduction. This means providing honest, factual information about the relative risks of different substances and behaviors and strategies to minimize potential harm if they do choose to use. Section 9. Lessons Learned, Harm Reduction, and D.A.R.E's Legacy. The long and often controversial history of the D.A.R.E program offers valuable lessons. It serves as a powerful cautionary tale in the realm of public health and social policy. It demonstrates how a well-intentioned program, fueled by public fear and strong political backing, can become widely adopted and persist for decades despite a significant lack of scientific evidence supporting its effectiveness. The D.A.R.E saga underscores the critical importance of rigorous scientific evaluation for all public health initiatives, especially those aimed at vulnerable populations like children and adolescents. Good intentions are not enough. Harm reduction is a pragmatic and compassionate public health approach. It acknowledges that some level of drug use will likely continue to occur in society, despite efforts to prevent it. Instead of focusing solely on eliminating all drug use, harm reduction aims to reduce the negative health, social, and economic consequences associated with drug use for individuals, their families, and their communities. Examples of harm reduction strategies include providing sterile injection equipment to prevent disease transmission, distributing naloxone to reverse opioid overdoses, offering medication-assisted treatment for addiction, and establishing supervised consumption sites. This approach prioritizes saving lives and improving health. Integrating harm reduction principles into drug education, especially for older adolescents and young adults, is increasingly recognized as an important strategy. This means moving beyond simple just say no messages or scare tactics. It involves providing honest, accurate, and non-judgmental information about the relative risks of different substances and patterns of use. It can include teaching young people how to recognize the signs of an overdose, how to respond in an emergency, the dangers of mixing substances, and the importance of not driving under the influence. This approach empowers individuals to make safer choices if they do encounter or use drugs. The overall legacy of D.A.R.E is decidedly mixed. The original program, for all its popularity and resources, was largely a failure in achieving its primary goal of preventing youth drug use. It consumed enormous resources that could have been directed to more effective strategies. However, the organization's eventual willingness to adopt an evidence-based curriculum like Keeping It Real demonstrates a capacity for institutional learning and change, albeit a slow one. Ultimately, the story of D.A.R.E highlights the ongoing need for drug prevention efforts to be firmly grounded in scientific evidence, to be adaptable and responsive to new knowledge, and to be part of a much broader, comprehensive public health strategy that includes harm reduction.